Welcome to the second part of our discussion on the supply chain management now. So we are focused now on supply chain management. So we look at this case. So under the management accounting process practice side, we look at the practical application of supply chain management. So supply chain management has become a critically important issue in many companies and other organizations. So let us look at the example cited, the Caterpillar Inc., the inventory bullwhip effect. So kung babasahin mo yan and the sample under US Marine Corps, we look at Caterpillar Inc. So hindi ko nabasahin yung buo, but I will discuss the gist of this article. So, basahin ko lang yung unang statements. Managing the supply chain is particularly critical for management during an economic slump and as the economy starts to emerge from a downturn. So, when we say an economic slump, this is a downturn. Okay, this is a negative connotation of the operations of a particular business. So Caterpillar recently told its steel suppliers that it will be more than double its purchases of the metal within a year, even if there's no increase in sales. So the logic under the article is that Caterpillar is experiencing an economic slump and a downturn. However, it placed an order that is still more than double pa nga ng kanyang normal order ng metal. So bakit? So bakit ganon ang ginagawa ng Caterpillar? Kaya nga ang question dyan ay, why would Caterpillar be making such a large inventory resupply effort even in the face of a nearly flat sales? Kahit na parang wala ka namang based on your sales data ay kakaunti ang bumibili sa iyo, but why the need to make a large inventory resupply effort? Bakit kailangan mag-stock up ng ganito kadaming number of inventories? The answer is chalk it up to the bullwhip effect. So because of the bullwhip effect. So what does the bullwhip effect means? So this is a new concept under the managerial accounting. This phenomenon occurs when companies significantly cut or add inventories. So kung significantly binabaan yung inventory, that is a bullwhip effect. Also, kapag naman nag-add ng large volumes or large supply efforts, that is also a phenomenon uh, under the concept of bullwhip effect. So what does it mean? Economists call it a bullwhip because even small increases in demand can cause a big snap in the need for parts and materials further down the supply chain. The bullwhip has broad implications for the economy as companies rush to fill orders while also restocking warehouse shelves. It touches everyone from retailers to the industrial companies that supply the many resources needed to manufacture more products. The manner in which companies large and small respond to market shifts determines which ones emerge first from an economic downturn and start to grow again. So ano ang sinasabi diyan? Caterpillar is taking a risk on stocking a large pile of inventory so that when the time comes na because of its efforts and kapag kasi yan ay flat sales, normally yan ay merong mga marketing efforts na ginagawa yan. So, ang sinasabi lang dito ay Caterpillar is just taking a risk na kung halimbawa the marketing efforts will provide a favorable output in the future, meron na siyang available large inventories that will be sufficient and that will be ahead of competition. Kasi yung iba magre-restock pa lang pero siya ay available na kaagad. So that is a new concept under the bullwhip effect. Kaya nga ang sinasabi nga rin dito, 'di ba? Uh, kahit na maliit na increase lang in the demand, it will cause a big snap in the need for parts and materials further down the supply chain. Kaya nga siya bullwhip, 'di ba? Kasi kapag yung whip pag 'di ba? When the bull whips o yung uh, paghampas niyaan, that would have a major impact, kumbaga aalingaw-ngaw. That would hindi lang basta isang snap ay isa lang ang maapektuhan. That will have a domino effect on the other uh, items such as parts, materials, tires, and among others. So ganon ang concept ng bullwhip effect. This is a matter of taking a risk in looking at the supply and demand in the industry, and uh, this concept should be backed by financial information. So, kailangan makita mo mabuti yung demand for a particular product, the forecast of the management consultants must be there, na makita natin that there is really the possibility for a uh, for a surge dun sa ating sales data, kasi hindi naman pwedeng we just haphazardly decides na ganun ang gawin natin under the bullwhip concept. Okay? So dapat yan ay base pa rin doon sa forecast at available data, and of course of our available resources. Now we look at the sample of US Marine Corps. Okay. The U.S. Marine Corps knew they had problems. When a soldier at Camp Pendleton would put in an order for a spare part, it took him a week to get it from the other side of the base. Private companies, meanwhile, were greasing their supply chains to provide just-in-time delivery, and the Marines they knew they could do better. So the Corps sketched a 10-year tech strategy in logistics to ensure that 173,000 Marines have what they need when they need it. To execute, the Corps hired consultants and studied companies like Walmart and United Parcel Service. The Corps aims to reduce inventory by half, saving up to 200 million. Taking a page from Unilever and Swiss Air, the Corps is developing better relations with suppliers to make sure they have access to hard-to-get items like tank parts. And with advice from Caterpillar, the Marines have been upgrading warehouses, adding gadgets like handheld wireless scanners for real-time inventory placement and tracking. So this is innovation in the technology used under the US Marine Corps. So ang sinasabi dito, kaya siya under the supply chain management practice ay it is used. So gumagamit tayo ng several innovations in technology to be able to get the inventory or the items when we really need it, at the time that we need it. Yun ang concept talaga ng supply chain management. We use technologies, we use information, we proactively work with our suppliers so that the inputs, materials, or the inventories will be at our uh, manufacturing sites, at our warehouses when we need it. Especially when competition is the competition now is not only based on the price but on the basis of time and uh, the delivery to the customers, among others. So yun ang concept ng that is an update, really an update in managerial accounting, dahil we look at how the inventories would be at the doorsteps of our customers when they need it. Okay. So I think we are done with the discussion on supply chain management. Okay, we look at okay, so this is the summary of event sequence in a job order costing system. So nagpe-place tayo ng production order for a job. So merong nag-authorize diyan doon sa that will depend on the policy of the company kung sino mag-authorize doon sa production order for the particular job. Normally diyan ay yung production manager. Next, dahil the production order for a job has been authorized and approved, we now look at our components, yung three components such as material, labor, and then the overhead. Under this, gumagamit tayo ng normal costing dahil predetermined overhead rate ang ating basis, and then multiply it to the cost driver. Direct labor based on time records, and then the material requisition naman for your material requirements. And all of this, itong three, will be placed in the work in process, inventory, ledger, and apart from the work in process inventory, kasi dyan ay sama-sama, meron po tayong subsidiary ledger for a particular job job order number, okay? And then the work in process, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, will be, once it is 100% complete, will be forwarded to the ledger of the finished goods inventory. And then once it is sold, will be forwarded to the cost of goods sold ledger, inventory ledger, okay? So that is the flow or the sequence of events under the job order costing system. The purchase of raw material, how do we recognize it? We debit raw material inventory, and then we credit accounts payable. The use of direct material, how do we recognize it? We debit work in process inventory, then we credit raw material inventory. Kumbaga, tina-transfer mo yung raw material into your work in process. How do we recognize indirect material? You debit manufacturing overhead and then credit manufacturing supplies inventory. Okay? This is just a review because this already been discussed on your cost accounting. What about the direct labor? We debit work in process inventory, and then we credit wages payable. Normally, yung wages payable na uh, kumbaga, we accrue our labor. And then eventually, yung wages payable na yan will be paid. Debit wages payable, credit cash, okay? Okay, wag indirect labor naman, we debit manufacturing overhead and then credit wages payable. Okay? You can also compound the entry for that. Yung doon sa direct labor and indirect labor. Okay? According to Chrysler, as production processes are becoming more automated, manufacturing overhead is becoming a greater and greater portion of total manufacturing costs. This is true of almost all manufacturing firms. Okay. Okay, we look at some of the items na hindi natin, yung kailangan nating i-discuss. Excuse me. Of the items here are just computations of how the cost of goods manufactured are computed, the cost of goods sold. So we will not be discuss a detailed by detailed item for that because yon ay na-discuss na po sa inyong cost accounting. This we will look just on the updates in managerial accounting. But on your assessments or activities, merong mga items. Kumbaga, to review, may mga items na pagkukumpitin ka pa rin ng cost of goods manufactured and cost of goods sold because hindi natin pwedeng alisin yun dahil yun ay talagang lumalabas on the CPA board exam, in practice, kailangan alam mo yan because once you engage in practicing your profession in manufacturing companies, that is imperative or requirement talaga yan na alam mo yung basics of computing the cost of goods manufactured and sold. Okay, let's look at the further aspects of overhead application, yung comparison between the actual and the normal costing. We use actual costing system for the cost incurred in producing a feature film, that is according to Walt Disney. So bakit kaya actual costing ang ginagamit nila? So what lies between the a differentiation between actual and normal costing? So meron po tayong ano dito, illustration here. We'll look at actual costing and normal costing, work in process inventory as an example of looking at how the costs are assigned. So the product cost is composed of your material, labor, and your overhead. So, sa material and labor, walang pinagkaiba yan under actual and normal costing because they use the actual material and labor cost. Yung overhead ang may pinagkaiba because under the normal costing, we use a predetermined overhead rate which is normally given in a particular problem at kung hindi man given, ay ibinibigay sa iyo yung basis on how to compute the predetermined overhead rate. Normally based on labor hours, labor cost, pwedeng machine hours, uh, pwedeng sa throughput time, and number of setups, and among others. So yan po, once you compute the rate, so this rate is per unit, per hour, and per labor cost, among others. These are computed at the beginning of the period. Kaya nga siya predetermined dahil hindi pa na-place into production, meron na tayong basis ng ating overhead rate. This is multiplied to your actual amount of cost driver use, example, direct labor hours, etc. Under the actual costing, dahil actual, we use actual overhead rate. Paano makukompute, sir, yung actual overhead rate so ibig sabihin at the end of the period pa yan kasi actual, yes. This is computed at the end of the period, kaya actual overhead rate multiplied by the actual amount of cost driver used, the direct labor hours, etc. Okay, so one of the contrast with this is that the use of actual costing does not promote timeliness kasi we look at computing the overhead rate at the end of the period pa. Okay? While the predetermined overhead rate provides for timeliness, yung accuracy naman yan sometimes is jeopardized. But in accounting, in management accounting, we have to a little bit sacrifice our accuracy when we look at timeliness or in making decisions for the company. Kaya nga, we have most companies will be used if majority, if not all, companies are using the normal costing way of allocating the overhead. Okay? Direct labor is becoming less and less appropriate as a basis for the application of manufacturing overhead. This is according to Chrysler. Why? Kung babasahin mo itong passage na ito, ang concept lang na sinasabi niya dyan ay, because of technology, because of automation and innovation in our production systems, hindi na po appropriate na direct labor hours, direct labor cost ang gamitin natin, especially for factory and manufacturing firms that are majority of its operations are in automated mode. Kasi less human or labor intervention na yan. So, ang ibig sabihin yan, dapat gumamit na tayo ng mga driver or dapat gumamit na tayo ng mga driver that would really reflect our operations, yung nakakasabay yung driver doon sa mismong pag-accumulate natin ng cost. At ano-ano na yon. For example, when the system is automated, ang gamitin natin ay yung machine hours rather than labor hours. Pwedeng gumamit tayo ng andyan, binabanggit dyan, the throughput time. For this reason, some firms have switched to machine hours, process time, or throughput time as cost drivers. Okay? What a throughput time means. So, as a reviewer, or the cycle time, ang sinasabi is, this is the average amount of time required to convert the raw materials into finished goods ready to be shipped to customers. Okay? Throughput time includes the time required for material handling, production, processing, inspection, and packaging. Okay? Okay. This two-stage cost allocation, ang sinasabi lang po dito is that we look at the allocation process of assigning manufacturing overhead costs to production jobs. Bakit two-stage? One kasi is one way of under the stage 1, all manufacturing overhead costs are assigned to the firm's production departments. So, dun sa production departments, andun lahat. Andun yung service department, andun yung mga production departments talaga, yung involved sa mismong pag-manufacture ng product. So after mong sa under stage 1, i-allocate mo lahat doon. Halimbawa, ang sample dito is yung natural gas, tama ba? Okay. The cost of heating a factory with natural gas would be distributed among all departments kasi dun sa factory andun lahat eh. And may service department doon, mayroon dong production department. Okay? So, to be able to assign cost reliably, yung makapag-assign tayo reliably dun sa ating mga product cost, doon sa second stage, doon sa stage 2 naman, yung lahat ng na-assign doon sa service department will now be reallocated doon sa ating production department. Kaya nga sabi niyo dyan, all of the manufacturing overhead costs accumulated in each production department are assigned to the production jobs on which the department has work. This process is called overhead application. Okay, under this kasi, yung second, all service department costs are reassigned to the production departments through a process called service department cost allocation. So, from service, i-allocate sa production. Sa stage 2 naman, yung nandun sa production department ay i-assign na dun sa particular production jobs. Okay? So, kaya po siya two-stage cost allocation process. Okay. So, this illustration is just a depiction of how the two-stage cost allocation is done in manufacturing companies. Okay. Okay, I think we're done with this. Okay, let's just have a quick analysis of these major technology updates in manufacturing operations, the use of EDI, the extensible markup language, and the barcode tracking, radio frequency identification. So the electronic data interchange is a direct exchange of data between organizations via computer-to-computer interface. So EDI is used to transmit documents as purchase order, shipping notice, receiving notice, invoices. The electronic data interchange is now in widespread use. So this is an update in managerial accounting because under the traditional managerial accounting concept, wala pa yung mga ganitong klaseng technology. Saan mo maririnig yung EDI, XML, barcode tracking, RFID, hindi pa yan ginagamit under the traditional. So these are innovations in technology related to supply and the process ng manufacturing. Same is true with the barcode and RFID systems. Sa yung RFID systems, ayan ay ginagamit uh, uh, in the Philippines sa ating mga toll fees. Gumagamit tayo ng RFIDs. In the government, also, minamandate na yan na lahat ng vehicle ng government ay under an RFID system ng pagbabayad ng toll kasi mas madaling i-monitor yan at mas reliable ang paper trail ng transactions kasi mas makikita natin kung saang gaano kalayong mga mileage ang tinatakbo ng bawat government vehicle. So nakikita po natin yan doon. Baka mamaya yung government vehicle nagpupunta na ng Boracay, ganun. So nakikita yan doon sa tracking under the RFID system. So same is true with our inventories na ginagamitan ng RFID at ng barcodes. Kaya nga these innovations in technology in monitoring and backtracking our inventory, our supplies, and among others, ay malaki ang naitutulong on uh, on looking at our purchasing functions, warehousing functions, kasi nakikita na natin timely kung ilan na ba ang number of inventories sa warehouse, kailangan na ba mag-place ng order, and among others. Okay, the concept of RFID. Okay, I just want you to read the ethics related to the Boeing and make a quick analysis of how Boeing allegedly exploit the accounting rules to conceal cost overruns and production snafus on its system. So, just to give you a brief backgrounder about this, si Boeing kasi yan yung gumagawa ng mga eroplano. This is a big company that is involved in the manufacture of aircraft at helicopters and ang sabi nga nila almost anything that flies ay minamanufacture ng Boeing. So, yaang si Boeing, nagkaroon siya ng merger with McDonnell Douglas Corporation. At doon nagkaroon ng issues on the merger. So, basahin mo itong passage na itong text na ito because it will um, give you an insight kung meron ka ba talagang natutunan on the items on your financial accounting and the basic concepts. Kasi ang issue dito ay kaya nga ang sabi, yung concealing of the cost overruns and production is nafus. So dun tayo po sa costing. Si Boeing meron siyang inintroduce na accounting system that is program accounting. Na ang sinasabi diyan sa program accounting na yan ay yung mga yung cost na na-incur mo per particular product ay ini-spread out over a long number of years. So halimbawa, nag-incur ako ng 2 billion this year, under the concept of this system, yung program accounting na sinasabi, ay imbes na i-report ko ito as an expense on our income statement for this particular month or this particular year, ay yaan po ay ini-spread out ko on the succeeding years pa. So ganon ang naging ethical issue here. Kaya nga ang question dyan ay, at the end, this is an open-ended statement that will question your hindsight of accounting. What is your view of how Boeing handled its cost overruns, its production problems, and the merger with McDonnell Douglas? Did the company's top executives act ethically? How about the accountants? So, may incorporate natin yung knowledge na-attain natin on our uh, on our basically basic accounting, na is it really allowed based on our standards to spread out costs across a particular number of years when the cost has been incurred for this particular period? Ano ito? Para ba itong depreciation? Para ba itong software na ina-amortize on a particular years? So I want you to take a look at this. So that question I will leave with you, and that would be the end for the discussion for this module and for this chapter. Thank you.